The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty parking lot of a small auto repair shop when Daniel Carter pulled his battered old car into the corner. The vehicle looked like it had survived 3 different lifetimes. Its faded blue paint was peeling from the hood, one headlight was cracked, and the driver's door made a terrible squeaking sound every time it opened. Daniel knew exactly what people thought when they saw it. Junk. Worthless. A $150 wreck. But to Daniel, the car was much more than that. It was the only thing he had left from the life he once shared with his late father. His father had been a mechanic who spent decades working with his hands, and the old car had been his pride and joy before an accident left it sitting forgotten in a garage. After his father's death, Daniel had bought the wreck for exactly $150, hoping to restore it someday. Unfortunately, life had other plans. Daniel was a single father raising his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Every dollar he earned went toward rent, groceries, school supplies, and the endless expenses that came with raising a child alone. Restoring an old car was a luxury he simply couldn't afford. So he kept driving it. That day, Daniel had barely stepped out when a sleek black SUV pulled into the shop. A woman in expensive sunglasses stepped out, followed by a sharply dressed man carrying a briefcase. The woman glanced at Daniel's car and immediately laughed. "Is that actually yours?" she asked. Daniel looked at her calmly. "Yes." She removed her sunglasses and stared at the rusty vehicle. "Wow," she said. "I didn't know people still drove things like that." A few workers nearby tried not to smile. Daniel ignored the comments and opened the hood. The woman walked closer, clearly amused. "How much did you pay for it?" Daniel hesitated. $150. Her laughter became louder. $150? You could have bought a bicycle." Daniel's face remained expressionless. "My daughter likes it." That answer seemed to surprise her for half a second, but then she shrugged. "Well, good luck with that." She walked toward the repair shop, completely unaware that the old wreck she had just mocked was about to become one of the most valuable cars in the world. Daniel didn't know it either. All he knew was that his daughter Emma had been asking him for weeks to fix the car's broken radio. He had promised her that he would try. As Daniel leaned over the engine, he noticed something strange. There was a small metal plate hidden beneath layers of dirt near the engine block. He wiped it clean. His heart suddenly stopped. The numbers stamped into the plate weren't random. Daniel recognized them. They matched the identification markings used on a legendary racing prototype from decades ago. His father had once mentioned that he had worked on a mysterious race car for a famous driver. Daniel had always assumed it was just another story. But now, standing beside a $150 wreck, Daniel realized something terrifying. His father may have left him something worth far more than money. And somewhere in the racing world, someone had been searching for that exact car for years. 7 days later, a NASCAR legend would walk into Daniel's life. For the next several hours, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the metal plate hidden beneath the engine. After Emma fell asleep that night, he returned to the garage with a flashlight and carefully examined every inch of the old car. He had no idea what he was looking at, but something told him his father had known exactly what this vehicle was. Daniel searched through an old box of his father's belongings. Inside were photographs, faded receipts, mechanic's notes, and a small leather notebook. Most of the pages were filled with technical drawings and numbers that Daniel couldn't understand. Then he found a photograph. It showed his father standing beside a much younger version of the same car. Next to him stood a famous NASCAR driver from decades earlier. Daniel stared at the picture in disbelief. On the back, his father had written only one sentence. "Some machines are not built to be forgotten." Daniel immediately contacted an automotive historian he found online. He sent photographs of the car, the metal plate, and the old picture. The historian's response came less than an hour later. "Where did you get this?" Daniel explained that it had belonged to his father. The historian called him immediately. "Listen to me carefully," the man said. "Do not sell this car. Do not let anyone take it apart. And don't tell anyone else about it until I can see it in person." Daniel's heart began pounding. "Why?" There was a long silence. "Because if I'm right, you don't own a $150 wreck." The next morning, Daniel took the car to a specialist. The examination revealed something unbelievable. Hidden beneath layers of rust and replacement parts was the original chassis of a racing prototype believed to have disappeared decades earlier. It wasn't just any prototype. It was connected to a legendary NASCAR racing program from the golden age of American motorsports. The car had apparently been built as an experimental machine, designed to test an engine configuration that was later banned from competition. Only a handful had ever been produced. And one of them had vanished. The specialist estimated that the vehicle could be worth millions to the right collector. Daniel didn't believe him. Millions, he whispered. The specialist nodded. But there is one problem. If word gets out, everyone will want it. Daniel thought about the woman who had laughed at him 7 days earlier. He remembered her expensive SUV. He remembered her calling his car worthless. For the first time, Daniel smiled. But he didn't celebrate. Instead, he thought about his daughter. Emma had never cared about the car's value. To her, it was simply the old car her father promised to fix. She loved sitting in the passenger seat and pretending they were going on adventures. Daniel decided that no matter what happened, he wouldn't let money change their lives. Then, on the 7th day, everything changed. A black luxury vehicle arrived outside Daniel's small house. A man stepped out wearing a racing jacket. Daniel recognized him immediately. He was one of the most famous NASCAR legends in American history. The man walked toward the old car and stopped. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he slowly touched the rust-covered hood. His eyes filled with emotion. "I thought this car was gone forever," he whispered. Daniel stared at him. The legend looked directly into his eyes. "How much do you want for it?" Daniel had no idea that the answer to that question would soon become the biggest automotive headline in decades. And when the final offer came, Daniel would struggle to believe the number written on the contract. $4.8 million. Cash. Daniel stood frozen in his driveway, staring at the NASCAR legend who had just offered him $4.8 million for the old car. For a moment, he thought he had misunderstood. "Excuse me," the legend smiled. "I said I'll pay you $4.8 million. Cash." Daniel looked back at the rusty vehicle. The same vehicle people had laughed at. The same vehicle Daniel had purchased for $150. The same vehicle that had barely started some mornings. And now one of the most famous names in racing was offering millions for it. Daniel shook his head. "There has to be a mistake." "There isn't," the legend replied. He introduced himself as Michael Hayes, a retired NASCAR champion whose name had become synonymous with American racing. He explained that decades earlier, he had driven a car built from the same experimental design. But there was something special about Daniel's vehicle. It was believed to be the final surviving prototype. Michael had spent years searching for it. "I thought it was destroyed in a fire," he said. "Your father saved it." Daniel immediately thought of the old photograph. "My father never told me." Michael looked down. "Maybe he was protecting you." That sentence hit Daniel harder than he expected. His father had always been mysterious about his past. He rarely talked about racing, even though Daniel knew mechanics had been his entire life. Now Daniel understood why. His father hadn't simply repaired cars. He had helped preserve a piece of racing history. Michael opened a briefcase and placed a contract on the hood. "I want to restore this car properly," he said. "Not for myself. For history." Daniel stared at the number. $4,800,000. He imagined what that money could do. A better house. A college fund for Emma. Medical security. A life without constantly worrying about the next bill. But then he remembered his father's words. "Some machines are not built to be forgotten." Daniel looked at Michael. "Why do you want it so badly?" The racing legend became quiet. "Because I was there the night this car disappeared. I was young. Your father was the mechanic responsible for it. When the prototype was damaged, everyone wanted it destroyed. Your father refused." Michael's voice became emotional. He believed it deserved another chance. Daniel looked at the battered car. Suddenly, he understood. The car wasn't valuable because of its rust or its engine. It was valuable because it carried a story. A story about his father. A story about racing. A story that had survived for decades. Daniel finally signed the contract. But before handing over the keys, he made one request. "I want my daughter to see it one last time." Michael agreed. Emma came outside and stared at the crowd of people surrounding their old car. "Are we famous now?" she asked. Daniel laughed. "Not exactly." Michael crouched down beside her. "Your dad's car is very special." Emma looked at the rusty vehicle. "But Daddy said it was broken." Michael smiled. "It was never broken. It was waiting." Those words brought tears to Daniel's eyes. 7 days earlier, a stranger had laughed at his $150 wreck. Now, that same wreck had sold for $4.8 million in cash. But Daniel realized something important. The money wasn't the greatest treasure. The greatest treasure was discovering the truth about his father. Months later, the car was restored and displayed at a major racing museum. Daniel and Emma were invited to the opening ceremony. As thousands of people gathered around the legendary machine, Daniel noticed a small plaque beside it. It read, "Found after decades of being forgotten. Preserved by a mechanic who believed history deserved a second chance." Daniel stood silently beside Emma. She reached for his hand. "Are you happy, Daddy?" Daniel smiled. "More than you know." And somewhere in the crowd, Michael Hayes watched them proudly. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries aren't found in expensive garages or auction houses. Sometimes, they're sitting quietly in a forgotten driveway, covered in rust, waiting for someone to believe they're worth saving. And when he saw what was hidden beneath the rust, he would make Daniel an offer that would shock the entire country.